Good evening, everybody.
Howdy.
Good evening, Ken.
We missed everyone last week, but most people were still kind of recovering or getting settled in after the feast. And we're back this week with episode 590. We're closing in quickly. I think by the end of the year, it's going to be close to a 600 episode. And tonight's title, which I had a second ago, can President Trump or someone like him push Israel to build the third temple? And tonight we have Jason and Michael, and as always, Dr. Ricks. If you would start us out, I would appreciate it.
We'll just go with three groaners this time. Three groaners. I may break down and tell a fourth one, but we'll see.
There's never been three. We've never been held to three before.
What do you call a dog that gets lost on Halloween? A werewolf. Yeah, where? Okay, here's a deep thought. Why don't fish play basketball? Why don't they play basketball? They're afraid of the net. This one is kind of cute if I tell it right. I decided maybe I would tell one more, just to keep things going the way they should go. This was called, it's a computer joke. This guy wanted to learn all about computers and really get into it deeply. So he went to the library for months and months. He was checking out and reading books. The librarian said, "You must be getting really good with computers now." And he said, "Well, thank you, but how can you tell?" She says, "Well, the only 2 of the last 10 books you checked out had in the word 'for dummies' in the title." Now, this one is the pièce de résistance. Pièce de résistance show. Okay. In a small village on the frontier, a boy says to his dad, and he says, "I want to know where people's names come from." So the dad said, "Well, one day when your brother was born, we looked outside and we saw a bear fight. So he got the name Fighting Bear, which is quite honorable among our people. And when your older sister was born, we saw a bird fly out of a tree, so we called her Flying Bird." And the little boy, he said, and why do you ask, pooping dog?" I know that joke is.
I've heard that one a little different, not safe for anything, actually, but yeah.
Not safe for public.
No, not safe for public consumption. No.
I said, well, it's at least I got the cleanup version of it.
Yes.
By the way, I'm not necessarily saying you should tell that joke in public in case you decide it's politically incorrect. Or whatever. Okay. So can the president play a role of the Persian emperor for the temple? Actually, we talked about this about 4 years ago or so. And when I saw 2 people line up with, well, what I saw then was I saw Netanyahu's wish list, and building the third temple is at the bottom of his wish list. Now, he has a lot of others much higher priority. And then I saw Donald Trump, a builder, get a greater partnership with him. And my mind thought, well, anyway, so you know why I'm thinking what I think. Now, whether I'm right or wrong, I think it will make a good discussion.
Yeah, we first touched on this idea back in 17 or 18 or 19 or something when we come up with this, seeing how Trump was a builder. So it just makes sense.
And he doesn't build modestly. It's gold plated and grand. By the way, the temple was gold plated, and you know all that stuff. They put gold over the cedar and gold. And Donald Trump, have you seen the Oval Office? How much gold there is in there?
Yeah.
No, it's almost blinding glitter.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm over exaggerating, but there's gold. It appears there's gold on the curtains. Now, maybe I'm just looking at it wrong.
He likes to build things that look really ornate and grandiose and all that. I mean, the man has gold toilets on his airplanes.
Wasn't he wanting to, like, what do they call that in the missile defense system in Israel? Is called the Iron Dome.
Mm-hmm.
Am I
He
right
wants
on
a
that?
golden dome.
Yes.
He wants a golden dome here
For America, Golden
Yeah,
Dome. It
Golden
does
Dome.
make sense. By the way, you know, when his first big success, when he and his dad had a nice rental business in one of the lesser boroughs of New York. I think it was Queens could have been the other one. But he said the big money is in Manhattan. So he moved the offices to Manhattan. And anyway, he took an area that was a couple blocks into a bad neighborhood in Manhattan. And he took an old big hotel and refurbished it, but saved all the grandiose stuff it's in one of his books, and made it really posh. I guess that's the right word for it. And it elevated that whole block. He made a ton of money. And I guess his dad actually said, once he put him in charge, he says he has the Midas touch.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, I think he had some problems when they had a great real estate collapse in Atlantic City. But except for that, he has had pretty much a Midas touch most of his life. But we shall see if what we think is possibly true or not. By the way, one of the things that I noticed watching the news, anybody notice that when he was in Hostage Square, whatever they call it, in Tel Aviv, and they were making speeches about Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and others were there, they cheered Trump, almost cheered him and cheered him and cheered him. Now, they didn't cheer Netanyahu, but they cheered Trump. And that's the left-wing center of Israel.
Yeah, I really think from all sides, he's really put his name on the line, if you will, for this peace deal, and has exerted quite a bit of force to get it into place. And to put his name behind it means that he's wrapped up in it, and the whole world knows that he pursues very strongly, whatever he throws himself behind, and that even those who disagree with him maybe on some things, that brings a certain amount of respect, and it certainly brings credibility to the table. I've heard that about Hamas and the reaction of some of the other Arab leaders. When he essentially made Netanyahu apologize to Qatar for striking there and promised they wouldn't do it again and all these things. That's seen as, he's willing to put leverage on them to get what he wants, and he wants peace. He wants this to take place. He's putting his name and his brand behind it, and so they're pretty sure he's gonna stand with it. There's not a lot of people like that, I guess, that are willing to push something pretty radical and put themselves in the forefront for it.
People take him serious because he's a deliberate man. He's a very deliberate man. I think he understands, and I do believe he wants peace. He wants peace, but he also understands that sometimes peace has to come at the end of a sword. Yeah. I think that he understands that, and people know that he's a deliberate man that understands that.
Yep.
And he's threatened Hamas. I think this is true. It's kind of complicated. Israel wanted to cut off supplies of food in the big center where Hamas still is, and apparently has some fighters and tunnels left. Israel did it, but Trump told them to cut it off. And they backed off because Trump told them to. And I think Israel wants to get in there and clean them up, but Trump, well, this is what I'm not sure of. I think he thinks they're going to put together an Arab Islam peacekeeping force that will finish disarming Hamas. But I'm hoping it works, but I don't know. The question is, Hamas is going to cheat. We all know that, right? They're going to cheat.
Right.
They're going to be secretly hiding weapons, and they can take off their clothes and just be civilians. By the way, all the Hamas people are not stupid beard-carrying savages. Some of them are doctors, lawyers, and businessmen. I mean, intelligent Gazans, if that's right, professional Gazans, and they can melt back into the population, and you might not know who they are. So I know they're going to cheat. The question is, can you trust whichever force is supposed to go in there and clean up? I'm not trying to say I don't believe the peace deal is a good deal. I'm just suspicious.
That is the problem with some of these things. Hamas is essentially just a name. The same people, renounce the name, and yet they're back inside of the security infrastructure. They retain prominent roles somehow there. And even if you call it something different, is it really not the same thing any longer? I think J.D. Vance, he's over there in Israel right now, and that's been some of the discussion. And he's assured. He's making some statements today about the security force, being comprised of nations, other Arab and Muslim nations, but the ones that Israel is particularly comfortable with. That it's going to be people they feel like they can trust, and there's some room for trust there. With Jordan has been, not radical. Egypt has done pretty well, but for instance, I think they rejected the idea of Turkey being involved on the ground over there. They don't really want that. They don't like that. Yeah, it's a bridge too far.
So, hopefully that'll. And I think Indonesia was volunteering. I don't know if they're going to accept them, but they probably could be trusted to not. But who knows? So there may be a couple difficult phases to go through. But here's my thought: no American president has had that much leverage with Israel, but he also has leverage with the Muslim nations. He got all the Muslim leaders in the area to show up, sign the deal. That means he's isolated Hamas from their supporters, at least theoretically. I know you said, well, they can cheat and lie, and that's always the problem, but at least formally, they have no more supporters, Hamas does.
Yeah, even the Arab countries are united behind the idea that they need to, get out of the picture. It's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal, especially the support and how much emotion is still wrapped up in the cause of Gaza over there. It's a pretty big deal for them to get Hamas out of the way. But it's been nothing but trouble. And I think practically and on the world stage, that's fairly evident. Kind of like with giving up the hostages. Even the Arab countries are like, you got to let these people go. It's been 2 years. You cannot keep them indefinitely. Even. Maybe things have been going in their favor, with recognition coming from some of these European countries and all that. But, this isn't those videos and stuff coming out. That's heartbreaking. This is atrocious, brutal, cruel stuff that's going on. And, how are they supposed to stand up and stand behind that? You really can't.
Do you see the one where this guy looked almost like a Holocaust survivor? He looked real frail in a dark tunnel, digging his own grave. I saw that on YouTube. I thought, man, I don't know how many people saw that, but that really makes Hamas. And the hand feeding him was fat. So it wasn't because they couldn't get any food in. They were just starving the man.
Yeah. Pretty sick.
I did hear something interesting. Now, these are Jewish commentators, maybe biased, but one man made a presentation to one of the survivors. He said he was kept in a dark, closed-in room. Couldn't open his arms all the way. It was that dark. And only given half a slice of bread a day. But he felt God was with him. And I think they bribed him or tried to bribe them to convert to Islam, and they would feed him and not mistreat him. And apparently he held out, held strong. He claimed he prayed like he's never prayed before. He felt God's presence. And I know people say, well, you say that. But if you heard this guy, he sounded convincing. That's all I can say.
Well, to come through something like that, I would think that's all you have. I would believe that. I heard that those people were in tunnels that were not even like 3 feet tall. Can you imagine being like that. I mean, that's I hear that, and it's like I don't want to think about it. It's just your mind will sit there and dwell on that. Just it's an ugly, ugly place to go. Very ugly place to go.
But here's my thought: if this peace process is reasonably successful, there are always going to be some hiccups, and the idea that you can get Muslims to cooperate with their Jewish neighbors and not want Holocaust maybe is wishful thinking. But if they can get it where they pretend to like each other, even that for 4, 5, 6 years is a great thing, don't you think?
A lot could happen in that time.
It's going to be
Yeah.
tenuous no matter what. There's a lot of red lines for everybody, and there's a lot of factions on both sides, I would say, that don't want peace, that are never going to truly go for it, even if they're kind of forced to play along for a while. There are factions on both sides who are, out for, annihilation.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I can understand the Jews wanting to annihilate Hamas. What they did is unconscionable. So I understand it. And I know about 80% of Hamas, something like that's been killed. But the ones left are still pretty evil and dangerous.
They had their
Anyway,
It's not just Hamas. The children's TV show called Martyr Mouse in Palestine, or in the last episode, the mouse blows itself up to kill Jews, is not I don't know what you do with them people. How do you negotiate with those people? How do you change their attitude? I mean, when you're taught from a childhood that killing Jews is a good idea, I don't know how you reach any kind of agreement, or I just don't know how that works.
A gun might help.
I thought of that, a joke about the 72 virgins, but I will behave myself.
I mean,
Let's all be good. Yeah.
your
Natalie.
3-4-year-old children are learning that Jews are evil, and it's a good thing to blow yourself up to get them. That's what they teach them over there.
That's why the last couple of phases, they have to learn to cooperate and live in harmony with each other. And it's a good goal, as we said previously. My thought is, this is an interesting situation. Israel has never had a president who supported them like President Trump has.
Right.
His daughter married a Jewish man, and some of his grandkids are being raised Jewish. So he's very much pro-Jewish. And although some of the weird media accuse him of being anti-Semitic, that's the craziest thing I ever heard of. Hitler helping the Jews. Israel's greatest friend, Hitler. You can see all that, but that's the kind of stuff our media push. How stupid it
So
sounds.
the entirety of the media and the left are just crying wolf. They're the boy who cries. Everything he does, he gets private industry to build a big addition onto the White House for free, and they cry about that. He wakes up in the morning and they cry. And he goes to sleep at night and he cry. He doesn't sleep and they cry. He flies, they cry. Everything he does, they cry. Why? I don't even listen to him. I don't care what.
And then when he
say.
takes 3 days off, they start celebrating he must be dead.
Yeah. He's off 3 days. You don't hear much from him. He's dead. And if he creates peace somewhere or brokers a peace agreement, he's bad. If he doesn't broker a peace agreement, it's just, why bother?
See, my thought was, we thought this years ago, but Trump didn't seem to have as much influence over Israel, especially the liberals in Israel, and the surrounding Islamic states as he does now. So in other words, what we thought in the past is seemingly more feasible than it was 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, obviously, we could be totally wrong. Would you read our first scripture, please, Ken?
Yes. Now in the first year, just go. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, the king of Persia. The Lord God of heaven has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah, who is among you of all his people. May his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. He is God.
So, and by the way, do you know a lot of Jews think Trump is Cyrus? I mean, I heard the chant and some of those things. That doesn't mean he is. And they've even released a coin with his likeness on one side and it says King Cyrus on the other. I mean, they think they see that parallel. But also, Trump did something else to help the city of Jerusalem. He had America move to recognize as Jerusalem as the official capital of the state of Israel, which gives them diplomatic credibility because obviously America is an important country. A few others have done it since then. You realize that Trump was under immense pressure not to do it from everybody. He said he just stopped answering the phone and did what he thought was best.
Yep.
And it's funny, after he did it, the PLO demonstrated for 2 or 3 days, but they're always demonstrating. The rest of the world, Trump had enough. He was starting to romance their new younger leaders. I mean that in a diplomatic sense, you know what I mean? that they didn't really, the backlash wasn't that great.
No. No, everybody thought Hamas will never go for this. He just didn't care. He just took them out of the equation. I don't care what they say. He just did what he did, and just they were they were inconsequential to getting the job done. Every president for 50 years promised to do the same thing, and not one of them even tried, but they all ran on it. He actually did it.
It takes courage to buck the system. And Trump is a disruptor. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
I got a book that claims he's a disruptor. That's where I got the title from. You're willing to break with establishment thinking. I don't know.
I think it's undeniable that he's changing the whole playing field of what's going on globally. I mean, it wasn't as big in his first term, but his second term, it's like, and I was talking about this down at the feast, but it seems like now it's time for things to change, and we're seeing that he's gaining respect. What you were talking about earlier, as far as not listening to the left and their continual babbling and crying and stuff. I think that they are destroying themselves. That's what they're doing. They're just losing credibility by the people are tired of it. And I think that we're seeing it. I think the fact that we saw 2 failed attempts on Trump's life, that he's going to be instrumental in changing a lot of things. I don't want to be a prophet and say he's going to do this, he's going to do this, but I do think that he is got a job to do on setting up things for things to happen. Let me just say it like that.
So true.
Yeah, he's he just, the gloves are off. He don't care anymore. He just don't care.
Well, it's changed. The everything is changing. I think that with there's a new found youth in America that I think is starting to see. That's where propaganda machine always targets the youth, because they're going to be coming up. We want to get them set to be what's going to, let's mold them. But I think there's a newfound youth that the whole Charlie Kirk movement was really touching.
Gen Z.
I think that I don't like to say this because I think it's a horrible thing that happened to him, but I think his death is going to have a greater impact on that movement than it would if he was still alive. I hope that doesn't come out wrong. But I know Charlie Kirk. He's asleep. I know where he is. He's asleep. God's going to wake him up one day. But I think that we're just seeing some incredible things happen right now, and the conversations that you have with a lot of people. And I'm talking about me and my little old world over here in South Central Texas. But a lot of people are really saying their eyes are opening to a changing horizon, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Ken, would you read Ezra 6:7? You're right, Jason.
Let the work of this house of God alone, let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews build this house of God on its site. Moreover, I issue a decree as to what you shall do for the building of this house of God. Let the cost be paid at the king's expense from taxes on the region beyond the river. This is to be given immediately to these men so that they are not hindered, and whatever they need, let it be given them day by day without fail.
I just mentioned that the history of it, they tried to block it, their enemies, but weren't able to block it. Um, and some prophets came along that changed the trajectory, two men especially. But let's go to the next section before we discuss them. This is just something that occurred to me. I don't know what you all think of it. Is God likely to test the Jewish state? And if he does test them, will they pass? By test, I mean they can build, if God, let's assume for a minute that God wants this temple built. I heard one man who's actually in the president's top cabinet, and I heard him say this. He said, Israel is not fully back until they build the third temple. Now, he's not a religious expert, but that was just he's a top cabinet member. That was just his opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of it that way too. That's, I think, how they thought of it in ancient times, because they built the city of Jerusalem first, but they didn't finish the temple for many years later because the enemies kept blocking it. So the question is, will the Jews do it short of a crisis or not?
Yeah, that's the tough thing. I mean, if you think of them, being as a nation really being behind it or really wanting it, and there is a lot of very liberal and secular Jews out there, thinking of it more as a nationality than as a religion, and maybe sometimes that's hard to do from our point of view. But there are some that don't want anything to do with it, that don't have anything to do with their religion or their traditions, and that's certainly true in the diaspora as well. What gets them there? I mean, there is a very vocal contingent that would be all for it. The one guy, and he's pretty controversial, Ben Gvir, he was up there in early August. He went up on the mount in the Al-Aqsa compound and he prayed openly, which they do it, but it's frowned upon. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of stepping out of what has been the norm for a long time. He went and he prayed openly. In an interview, he indicated that if he was in control, he would build a synagogue up there. They're in government. They're part of Netanyahu's coalition. Now Netanyahu's party is not on board. They passed this resolution this last week to annex part of the West Bank, which is a bigger headline than it is a story, because most of them weren't there in the Knesset. It was 24 to 25 out of 140 people or something like that should have been there. So it's not likely a non-starter. And that's a wrinkle in American influence as well. Vance, while he was over there, he called that a stupid political stunt, essentially. And Trump has issued assurances that they're not going to annex the West Bank or do anything like that. That's still a very big red line in the minds of a lot of Arab countries. When the guy prayed up there, Jordan accused him of breaking international law. Saudi Arabia was like, you're pushing everybody back towards violence and all this stuff. It's still a very, very, very sensitive issue over there.
And I saw some Jewish things, and they were critical of J.D. Vance, and maybe they didn't use Trump's name, but the administration, they want the Jews to expand. Now, I don't think they want them to annex all of the West Bank, but certain parts of it, maybe 5-6 blocks here, a couple square miles here or there, and make for better defense and stuff. I think they should be able to do it. It's their country, but the Arab world is very sensitive to that.
There's always there's the second option. And I've been hearing this for years, that is not the location of the actual temple. I don't know if it is or isn't, but I'm just saying, if they build a temple separate from that location, then I don't know what that. I mean, the Arabs wouldn't have much. I mean, they'd still complain, of course, but they couldn't say anything if they don't tear down the mosque.
By the way, my theory is based on Revelation 11, but I know we can't be sure. They're not going to tear down the mosque. They're going to just move start the temple maybe 50, 100 yards further down the road. They can maybe build up the end if they need to. In other words, they'll keep both. And don't you think, Michael, that would give them a easier time of explaining it if they kept both things up there?
I think sentiment would still have to change a good bit to get anything like that done. I think it would have to shift some to get it done peacefully. Otherwise, it makes more sense as, an act of war or some sort of disaster happens and sort of clears the way. And then are the Jews going to give back control or let Al-Aqsa be rebuilt? I would not think so. And as far as the different location and as well as far as putting it up there, what are the people going to accept? What are the Jewish people going to accept in terms of reinstituting the temple service? Some of them are ready to start the purification and stuff as long as they're in sight of it. Other ones, could they have the temple somewhere else? Are they going to convince themselves that it was actually somewhere else in the past and so that's not the right site at all? I've heard people allege that, well, the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, that counts as the third temple. Well, whatever. If they're there sacrificing and they're doing the temple ritual and all that, and all the Jews are behind it, they're all okay with it, and that's where it's going on. I think that's going to be the big key, because that's what you have to have in place for this beast to come in, and he's got to go in there and he's got to pretend that he is God. For these things to take place, it has to be happening and it has to be accepted, because there's no point in him going in there if everybody is not on board with it. So whatever all the other theories are, maybe, but you'll see when it happens and where it happens and who's behind it.
I agree. One more thing to add to what you said, Michael. It has to be pretty much agreed upon among most of the Jews and most of the world that this is the holiest site in the world, because that makes sense. But also it has to be an impressively built temple. He's not going to run up there, be crowned God in a tent or some little shacky building. They got great buildings in Rome. It's got to be an impressive building. And if Trump builds it, I think it's going to be impressive, or at least flashy and gold-plated. The original temple was gold-plated and silver-plated and all that stuff.
If he's
I think
involved,
even the basin they washed in, wasn't that a gigantic brass thing, but it's very valuable, and I can't remember. They had all kinds of valuable stuff up there.
Bronze sea, yeah.
Bronze. I said brass. I meant bronze, yeah.
If he's involved, he's going to take it very serious, and he's going to build the biggest, the best, the most. He has a replica of the Ark of the Covenant in Mar-a-Lago.
He does.
He does. And he would take it extremely serious, knowing his character, that he's actually doing something that he is supposed to do. So if anybody is going to do it up, as they say, it would be him.
Yes. By the way, we don't have to read the scripture, but Exodus 16:4 simply says, God tested the Israelites. And my point is they often didn't pass the test. They lost God's hedge of protection. Maybe if they don't build the temple when God thinks they should, maybe they'll lose God's protection and something bad will happen to them, Michael. And then in the crisis, they'll build it. But it would be better for them if they built it without a crisis. That's all I'm saying. And it could go either way. I think some leading member of our church said years ago when I was in the church that probably Israel will have a crisis and that'll force them to get religious. I'm told even now they have among the religious people, they have three major groups, and they can't decide who would be high priest if they got the temple. So they have more than one. I'm sure they could work it out, but they got more than. You think Judaism is united?
No.
I'm almost tempted to say they're more. Hope this doesn't offend anybody that's Jewish. They're more petty and divided than we Americans are.
I think my dad put it in the update this week that something that my grandfather said a long time ago, which is the Jews are really only united when they're standing together against something else. That otherwise it falls out. pretty hard. And that's in the biblical record. There's a lot of squabbling back and forth. And I mean, even before the splits between Judah and Israel, like there's conflict. They argue, they disagree. You're not going to be king. We're out of here. Whatever it may be. And if you think of it in a family sense, it kind of makes sense because sometimes it goes down that way. You know what I mean?
Whole families can be petty.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
never mind.
the world
Petty.
is in chaos. I mean, there's chaos everywhere. Russia keeps invading other people's airspace, and they keep. Who knows how messed up the world's going to get and how fast it can happen. I mean, we see how fast stories move, how fast things escalate in the world we live in today, and it wouldn't take much to have Israel see itself have to unite against an Arab world, which we know there is eventually going to be a king of the South anyway. So that would be a catalyst to get them all on board. I mean, and
we've talked some about youth and the impact that certain things have on future generations, like the Charlie Kirk assassination. How deeply that's going to resonate. I was like 14 or so when 9/11 came about, and my contemporaries and those inside of that age range were very much inspired to military service and participated in those campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan and all that. You pretty much have a very similar event in October 7th for the Jewish people, when this is a big, scarring incident that has taken place, and not just the initial capture of all these people, but then 2 years of war and all the protests and the hostages. It's been front page news the entire time. This affects the mindset of an entire generation, and so wherever they are at now, as a voting people, there are generations coming up who probably don't have a lot of tolerance for that kind of thing, and may be more maybe more serious about their nation and their traditions than they would have been otherwise, and that might have a profound impact on the future and on willingness to undertake things like that, or to return to what Scripture says.
So more Jewish religion. They were proud of this guy who was locked in this little 40 feet below ground, total dark little cage for 2 years, being starved. And he seems like his mind is okay. He probably has horrible nightmares, but he seemed okay. And I thought, wow. And they said it made people appreciate Judaism and not wanting, and it showed why they don't like people who want to proselyte. Like the Muslims tried to force all those hostages to convert. And apparently, as far as we know, none of the survivors did.
Mm.
One thing that's interesting, people will ask the question, was Trump spared in Butler, Pennsylvania, so that he could be a part of rebuilding the Third Temple?
Can't see it any other. Well, I don't know about that, but I can't see he was spared for sure, as it passed through his ear. How close can you get? How much closer can you get?
So you think that he was spared for such a purpose as this?
Well, I mean, he's definitely making peace over there. I don't know if this is going to happen under him, but it's certainly setting a stage to where it at least can happen. And that was a good point you made, Michael, about that youth. When you're talking about people, that being a very impactful thing like 9/11 was to you and your generation, and that October 7th deal, which was the last great day, is what it happened. That's we know it as, but that's happening on a high holy day for those people, and they were out there celebrating, and that will definitely pull that generation together to be very strong-willed.
By the way,
that.
Did they get the hostages back on the last holy day, last great day this year?
It was right before. It was immediately before. So really, about 2 full years in captivity, if you will, for those that were taken.
But
that
interesting,
made it.
They both happened at the same time. Roughly, the attack probably started right before the last great day and into the last great day, and then they got the hostages back right before the last great day. It's kind of interesting coincidence. The Jews are being blessed on the feast.
No.
Yep. And the news was covering, and they were calling the anniversary October 7th. Of course, they're going by the Roman calendar, and they're sitting there, and I was trying to tell people that I knew, and I said that's the last great day. It's the more significance to the attack being
Yes.
recognized happening that day.
And I think the radical barbarians who do it, they know it's a Jewish holy day.
Oh yeah,
that's one of the
Yes.
reasons they did it.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
When they did it.
Just like the Yom Kippur War, same philosophy. Strike them on a holy day.
Yep.
Yeah, probably made them mad, but Yom Kippur.
I mean, the Bible even says when you pray the attack doesn't come on a Sabbath. I mean,
yeah, that's
it's going to come. It may come on another the attack that most people are looking towards may come on a Sabbath.
An annual Sabbath,
An annual Sabbath, or we don't know which one, but yeah. All right, Nehemiah.
Ken, would you read those two verses, Nehemiah and Ezra 5?
Now it happened when Sanballat, or someone can tell me how to say that, Tobiah, Geshem, and the Arab, and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall and that there were no breaks left in it. So at the time I had not hung the doors and the gates. Then the prophet Haggai and Zechariah, the son of Iddo, prophets, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel. Zerubbabel rose up and began to build the house of God, which is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, helping them.
Okay, remember two men I mentioned, Haggai and Zechariah. They're the two prophets, and then the governor, Zerubbabel. The way I'm going to give the story quickly, but you can read all about it in Ezra and Nehemiah, all the details. The Jews got Cyrus permission to come back. Then their enemies forced them to stop building the temple and harassed them when they were trying to get the walls all set. Nehemiah is, of course, he has that famous line, "Should a man such as I hide?" But that is a great line for a hero. At any rate, so they heroically did it. And then the two prophets said, "You got to finish this temple." But they said, but the governor from the other side of the Euphrates and their enemy says, "No, we can't do it. It's not allowed." And they said, "Do it on faith." And they did. And it worked out wonderfully. And the question is, could the combination of Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump be two men that could persuade the Jews to do it? And then maybe a third party, a government official of Israel in the future, or some maybe Jewish super rabbi or special rabbi. They claim they've got one or two, but I guess that's to be debated among the groups. Also help with pushing this over the top. Part of my logic was, let's just say that at some point, in about 2 or 3 years, Netanyahu and Trump will be ending their terms, and they're going to have to retire forever. I mean, at least I'm pretty sure that's the case. And they're going to think, well, one more thing I'd like to add to my legacy, the third temple. And they start talking about it. Wouldn't it seem logical if Trump has a lot of influence with the Muslim nations, both conservative and liberal Jews, he'd be the one to push it at first?
Yeah, if the opportunity presents itself, like we talked about, things have to happen. But he's a builder, and he's a grandiose builder. Trump Tower, I mean, he would be the guy to do something like that. But like we said, things have got to line up for that to happen. But
I don't know if it needs to be constrained in the terms of his presidency. It depends on the future. Just because he's not officially in office anymore doesn't mean he will no longer have influence, or that he will have no role, or would not be able to be a benefactor or an intermediary or anything else like that. What's similar, and Cyrus is the emperor, pretty much unopposed, even though there's regional opposition to what the Jews are doing. They have his benefit, and they have his he's behind him. They have his blessing to do this, like in Isaiah, it calls him by name, 150 years in advance. This is a big prophetic deal that's transpiring at this point in time. And some of the challenges I think that are on the table today were not necessarily there, with not having anything else in the way, with not having a very hostile and also well-armed population in the region that's also attached to that site. Now you've got the division between Israel and Palestine. It's a creation of the UN dating back to 1948, and for the most part they're invested in it, in words at least, whether or not they'll do anything. But these European countries have been once again throwing themselves behind the idea of a Palestinian state. What are they going to sit still for to get this to come about? So how are we going to get from here to there at this point in time? That's the big question. Would Netanyahu do it? Yes. Would more radical people in Israel do it? Yes, I think so. This Ben Gvir guy, a lot of these other ones definitely would. Would something like that, appeal to Trump and his desire to, not only maybe honor God, but to put something there that's going to, last for, be in history for all time? I mean, the man has already changed the course of world affairs in this day and age. He is forcibly changing the course right now. I absolutely think it appeals to his character, and probably even his sense of what's right. But is he going to be able to swing it in the near term? And that's a big, I don't know. I do think his priority is our country, and that his legacy comes second. I do think that, and so he's probably most interested in keeping the peace over there for the time being.
Mike, an interesting thought is that David really wanted to build the first temple, but he wasn't allowed to. Went down to us, and I don't know if y'all look at, when I look at what's going on, and I look at the changes that's going on, but like you said, 3 more years, that's not a lot of time. There's a lot of things that have to happen, but of anybody, and not even Vance, but you take a look at his sons, of any of them ever stepping up to the plate. If the ship starts going towards the right, for the most part, because we get the youth and we get this great movement, and everything starts moving and starts getting better, and people see results. But what do you think about the young son he has? Whenever
Barron, you mean Barron?
Yes. Whenever you were sitting there saying about how these events impact people and how they become determined, think about what he's grown up seeing his dad and mom go through.
Radon Jr.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
I'm not saying he's a great. I don't think he wants to do it. But, but his
Barron,
new book
what do you think about
indicates
Barron
that
coming up
he's
one day?
fired up.
Thought.
But you're right, and I like something else you said, Michael. Trump could do this the year or 2 or 3 after he's out of office. Same with Netanyahu. They could be out of office. Let's just say J.D. Vance wins the election in 2029. You both know that Trump's going to have a lot of influence over him. Yeah. I mean, think about it logically. Yeah. Now, whether it's public or not, that's going to be the case. And he's probably going to have a lot of influence with public opinion in Israel as well, once he's retired. So you're right. It could happen a year or 2 after they're both out of office. I don't think the left media would not let that
be said.
That he has a lot of influence, you mean?
Oh, I don't think the left media would not let that not be said. They was, Trump's still doing all this.
Oh, they're gonna. Oh, say,
they would
Vance,
go crazy.
Yeah, they would continue to push that narrative.
But in spite of that, I still believe Vance would take Trump's lead on a lot of issues.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
if he was smart.
I think they believe a lot in the same things. I think they are in unison with what they're doing.
I mean, you can never predict. Vance could be a disaster. Everything can fall apart. And I'm like most people. Like one man said, if you can get 5 or 6 years of pretense peace with Israel, I'll take it. That's 5, 6 years better than what's been going on the previous 5, 6, 7 years of terror attacks and all the other stuff. I don't expect you're going to get permanent peace that will hold for 20 or 30 or 40 years. But if they can get 5 or 6 years of where they get the Arabs to pretend we want to like the Jews for the sake of economic growth. And I do think some of these, don't you think some Islamic leaders see that we're losing a lot of economic power we could have because we're spending all our time on terrorism. And terrorism, Israel is tough enough. Terrorism will hurt them, but it won't stop them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just tonight's a lot of speculation, but with reasonable understanding of who the people we're discussing. I mean, Trump and Netanyahu and that. I mean, it does line up with what could be possible. We couldn't have said this about any other president in recent history. I mean, there's been no other force like Trump since in my lifetime. So,
and all the others weren't really that supportive of Israel.
No.
They might have pretended to be. Actually, Obama was outright hostile to Netanyahu.
Yeah, he was.
He made him come in through the garbage door.
Made him come in the back door.
Sit with the garbage. Yeah.
Something interesting, I think, that has come up in the discussion of the future of Gaza specifically has been this idea of like an international board of governors, of which Trump was talked about to head up or to take control of, and for there to be a real Palestinian state, if you will, everybody's demanding that there be reforms, even in the PA, even in the Palestinian Authority over in the West Bank. They're not accepting them as is either. They're having to take a lot of oversight. This is almost a hark back to the protectorates and all that, which the United or the League of Nations or whatever it was at the time, put Britain in charge of the mandate of Palestine, if you will. It was they were just kind of in control like governors. You could almost see a return to some sort of situation like that in Gaza and the West Bank in order to ensure peace and good government. And then what influence does that have? Then if you have international peacekeepers in there, and so everything's tamped down, then you're dealing with a whole different dynamic. And could these men be involved in that? Personally, it's possible, or people like them that share some of the same ambitions. And this is going to keep growing. This temple is going to happen at some point in time. So, if we've speculated a lot tonight, it's because it has to get here somehow. And, all we can do is talk about it and watch. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. So it can't be bad, can't be bad.
The question is, why is the temple so important? We don't have to read the scriptures, but Matthew 24:15, disciples said, well, what are the signs of your coming? One of them he mentioned was the desecration of the temple as spoken by Daniel the prophet, and that's in Daniel 11:31. Well, everybody in the Jewish world knew what that meant. And so that's important. It has to be something they recognize. Ken, could you read Daniel 12:11? I know we're passing up two scriptures for time's sake, but people can look it up.
And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days.
And I know that 45-day difference, whatever it is exactly, 40, bothers people, and I don't have any explanation. But one thing is for sure, there's a countdown that begins when they stop the sacrifice and desecrate the temple. It's like countdown to launch. It's a countdown to the return of Christ. And the details may be a little fuzzy, as it was at 1290 or 1345 or whatever it is, but it's one of those two. So that makes the temple a very important event. When you see that, the end is not far away. And for any of us that are still alive at that time, and we might be, right?
You never know.
You never know. and head for places of safety. That's pretty much what I get out of what Christ had to say when you read everything in context. If you're able, if there's a place of safety that's appropriate. Um,
in reading about these days, preparing for this, some try to say it it has to do with Antiochus, at least typically, like from the desecration to the time that the service was restored, and then the further portion he died. Antiochus died right after that, as lining up with that, and prophetically, for the first day, the first number of days being a month more than 3.5 years that we expect the tribulation we talk about time and half a times and all that. And then the rest for the regathering of Israel to occur after Christ returns, which it says, and then really going back to true worship with Israel regathered under Jesus Christ on earth as being the significance of these things, and why you'd be blessed if you made it to that point in time. It would be really tremendous.
Sounds good. Sounds good. One thing I thought I would say. If 10 years from now nothing has happened on the sacred mountain, and they haven't planned the temple, they haven't built the temple, I still believe the scriptural principles in Ezra and Nehemiah are still true. Someday, two important men and later a government official like the governor will get together, influence the Jewish people, and they will rebuild that temple. Now, at this point, Trump and Netanyahu are the obvious likely ones. I can't think of anybody else in my lifetime that's been even closer to having that kind of influence with Israel and the surrounding Islamic states. By the way, Trump was even cheered by some people and the PLO people, and they see this peace treaty differently than Israel. I thought, wow, in other words, both sides were cheering when the peace treaty was signed. I thought, that's interesting. And then maybe each one sees something different in it. So I do see that.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of popularity is hard to manufacture in this world.
I mean, there's parts of the Arab world that really like Trump. I mean, they just like the guy. He can get away with things that nobody else can. They treat him better than the other presidents that visited their country. And it just makes sense that if someone's going to do it in our lifetime anyway, it may be him or maybe his sons or someone down the line that has the same kind of attitude towards things, I would say.
He's setting an example of how to get things done for younger generations. And, it's refreshing in a sense because, bureaucracy and the way that it moves and how it hems and haws and accomplishes nothing, it's very defeating. And, here he's coming in, pedal to the metal, pursuing his agenda. And whether you agree with him or not, it does garner a certain amount of respect. And it's probably, the lesson is probably being learned by a lot of like-minded individuals.
Well, that's the core as the reason why both sides hate him, both political sides, his own party and the Democrats, because they don't do anything. They just say, "Oh, we'll spend 5 years doing a study, and we're gonna, and the study says we can't do this." Trump says, "I don't care none about none of that. We're just gonna do it." He don't care. He just does it, and it makes them look stupid because they've told people for generations we can't move the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. We can't do any of these things. We can't move our
embassy
to Jerusalem but he just don't care. He don't care about any of it, and he's just making them all look stupid, and they hate that about him.
They claim the Arabs like Trump because he's a strong man, and that's what they like.
Right.
Here's a rumor. These are total rumors. They just finished the fourth prelim. I mean, I'm probably mispronouncing it, in China. And they were supposedly going to force Xi Jinping to accept a 2-year retirement package, but he survived it. They claim he survived it in part. Now, I know this is stretching things. Trump was not going to go to Korea and meet with whoever China was in charge of China unless it was Xi Jinping. And that influence was enough. Now, partially because the guys that want to force his retirement can't agree on who they want to replace him. So the opposition to him is not united, although they purged 9 of his generals. But the point that Trump's influence is even affecting the Communist Chinese Party, if that's true, isn't that a bit amazing?
That would be.
Or they're convinced that she is the best one to deal with Trump, and they've got to deal with Trump economically. I guess we will see, but I remember when everybody said, you can never close the border. It's too messy without the Congress passing all kind of new bills. Was it like 3 weeks and Trump had the border shut down?
Like zero. I guess you didn't need a new law. You just needed a new president. Is that what they said?
And when he said that, the State of the Union, you can imagine the Democrats are like,
oh, yeah.
because it was true. He
Oh, yeah.
gets things done and it works. Well, for the most part. I guess some things are still in play, like the Russian-Ukraine war, but I'll bet you someday, probably the next 3 or 4 months, that war will be settled and everybody will be shocked. By the way, probably neither side will be completely happy, but in a compromise, isn't that what happens?
Yeah, these new sanctions on their oil companies are going to bite. It's not going to take that long. It's starting. It's starting already.
And I heard that a lot of the banks at these oil companies, no one wants to bank in Moscow. The problems with all that stuff, and even with their brick stuff. The major banks want to use Western banks. Well, Trump is freezing their accounts or threatening to freeze their bank accounts. A lot of businesses are scared of that.
Yeah, the banks finance these oil purchases and stuff, and they're not going to do it if they're going to in turn be sanctioned. They do more business than that, so the oil companies have no choice. The Indian refineries and the major Chinese refineries that do international business. I know they got a lot of other little under the table ones, but the big ones who rely on that and who need to do cross border stuff are not going to get cut off from the world economy over this. There are other sources of supply, and they will find and use them.
And they know Trump. He threatens, but he doesn't bluff. He will eventually do something to those banks if they don't. And I think Putin wants, his generals are probably saying, we're going to win. Just hold on. We'll defeat Ukraine and have the whole thing. And we can set all the terms. And that, of course, could happen. But if that doesn't happen, I think they're going to have to cave in to Trump's pressure and compromise both sides. And that may be hard to do as well, but I think it's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, he's mainly asking for them to stop where they are right now, which, as you said, is not going to make either side happy, but at least it would stop. And, who knows how long it could hold. It could be the next Korea. And it just stays that for an unbelievable amount of time. And they're not technically at peace, but at least they're not blowing each other up. That's not a great solution, but it's better than the status quo right now.
I hope they can fall back to some major rivers, what I call natural borders, easy to defend. And then you'll have less friction until, there could be some future Russian government or Ukrainian government. When Crimea always was part of Russia until Khrushchev split it off in the 50s. But I can see where they can work out a compromise in the future when maybe they have more friendly governments. I think Putin and Zelensky hate each other.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah.
And so that only makes compromise harder. So I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think if anybody can put enough pressure on, Trump can. And I think eventually, unless the Ukrainian army breaks under the pressure, but I'm assuming if they've held on this long, they could hold on for another 3 or 4 months, don't you think?
But even if he does, I guess, broker that deal, and like you said, Mike, they'll just, they won't fight, but they'll be kind of at peace, still hating each other. But the world audience, it will be satisfied. There'll be a lot more people that it's going to give Trump more, credibility. Those countries might be upset and hurt about it, but there's a lot more world out there that will look at Trump with respect.
It helped Eisenhower and it helped Reagan. Well, Reagan's situation is a little different, but he said, "You better return those hostages when I get in office." And
Yeah.
the threat worked. Now, in Eisenhower's case, I don't remember the details. I hadn't read up on that, but it seemed like he implied to the communist Chinese who were in control that we better make out a deal when I get in the presidency when Truman leaves. And sure enough, when Truman left, they made the deal. Now, I don't know how much Eisenhower's threat, or, but I guess we don't need to know. But I bet there's some back channel pressure and threats, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
sure.
And we might argue that, yeah, a united Korea would be better, but even half of Korea being free is a big deal.
Yeah. You know they feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Korea has been a great success. You know that people don't think about South Korea as an economic little giant.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're out of time. Anything that we want to say about prophecy that we sort of got into it, dragged into it indirectly?
Yeah. We're pretty
Well,
much already there.
you said about after Trump's term, 3 years, if JD Vance would maybe get the next 4 years. Well, if y'all want to
Mhm.
wager a bet, I know some guys in the NBA that'll take it for us.
Yeah.
Anybody else hear about a bunch of Chinese generals being ousted and disappearing and turning up dead?
I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
And several before this last 9 also. In 2 cases, they claim they were interrogated, and the interrogation got robust, so the men committed suicide. Most people believe they were murdered.
Of course.
Yeah.
And see, it sounds better to say these guys are weak and committed suicide. Several generals, even before this last 9. In other words, power, fight, and the Communist Party is serious business. They play rough. And everything is secret. So all we hear are rumors, and no one can be sure. But Xi Jinping survived. Maybe Trump's influence had something to do with it, they think. But I do think we could have big shakeups in China in the next few years, too.
Mm.
I just pray the Chinese people get a government will take care of its people.
Yeah.
I think one thing we can say for sure, the next 3 years is going to be quite interesting.
Yeah.
I think it ain't going to be boring.
Yeah, Trump's not going to just sit back and let's let the status quo stay for 3. That's not like him, is it?
No.
We're
He's
not even
not-
through,
it
we're not
ain't
even all
even
the way
been a
through the
year
first
yet.
year. Yeah, I was
Well,
supposed to say we're not even through the
if
first
he
year.
can get a lot of these conflicts tamped down, he makes trade deals that are good for the United States. I think he's going to be, taking victory laps the whole time. If the economy gets popping again, and things get tamped down all over the place, and we're going to do business with everybody. New regime in Venezuela, peace with Russia, and the Europeans start doing business with them again as well, which a lot of them desperately want to do. You're talking about a surge in the world economy, I think, because we've weathered everything that's happened so far. But if it gets, if it starts, turning on the heat again, it's going to be, I think that's really what he wants. I think this is the kind of legacy that he wants. That's been his rhetoric for, ever since he started making public statements about, how we're getting ripped off all the time and all that. He wants to turn that around. He wants to make this place prosper like crazy. And, it's hard to not want that.
They have, I think it's 17 trillion in promised investments to bring factories back to America in the next 3 or 4 years. Assuming some of that starts next year and that tax cut kicks in next year. I don't know how big the tax cut is. I can't remember, but they say it's one of the best we've had in a long time compared to where things were last year. And that tax cut, isn't that likely to boost the economy?
Yes.
Now, we still have a housing problem. Nobody has figured this out. They put too many regulations and restrictions on building houses. The only way to get housing prices down is start building starter 2 or 3 bedroom homes, and a lot of them.
Well,
And so far, most of the buildings are apartment buildings.
As the illegals leave, housing is going to increase in many areas. So,
yeah, we got a housing crisis, so let's let in 12 to 15 million illegals to make things better.
Oh yeah, that fixes everything.
And they're hitting a lot of these problems are not just to the business community. They're hitting a lot of poor inner city people are having housing problems because the illegal have taken up a lot of the shelters and places. You just don't hear much about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hurting poor people as well. But I guess we shall see. I actually believe, and I'm obviously up to God, so there's probably a spiritual battle going on that we can't see. But assuming God lets things work the way they appear to be going, I think when the tax cuts kick in next year and everybody's getting no tax on tips or overtime, there's going to be more money to support small businesses in most towns. And that's got to be good for the economy.
When people have more money, that's what they start moving. It starts moving in the system. They start spending it. They invest. They do things. They open up businesses, like you said. But yeah, this is, what do y'all think about the government shutdown? How much longer do you think that's going to continue?
I have no idea.
When's the next regular budget when they don't have to worry about filibuster? Is there a next budget date when they have to do a permanent budget? And you can't filibuster that. I just can't remember when it comes up.
They're tightening a noose around their neck, it seems like right now, just by keeping it shut down. I don't understand.
Somebody's telling the left to hold the line because this is not looking good on them. They're losing this one. The messaging on this one.
How is it that they can think they're winning? I mean, you hear the narrative, but it doesn't make sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And I mean, I heard this. Somebody said, well, they were going to, but then they didn't want to because it was too close to the No Kings rally. I thought
heard that too.
That's the way third graders think.
Unless
I mean that doesn't.
I know
the logic is so far away from mature people.
I know it could get ugly in November. Maybe that's what they want. I don't know.
And then they're saying like the ones that are like Chuck Schumer and them, that AOC is going to be his replacement. I think that they're even going more left, and I don't think they're going to be able to convince the people that that's the way to go. I just see the whole party collapsing inward.
Here's a thought that dawned on me. Looking at the world as a whole, if American hegemony predominates and even has some influence with even China, I believe Israel will also be more prosperous if America is more prosperous. Yes. And they'll be financially stronger. And I think the Jewish state needs to be built up to fulfill Bible prophecy. I don't know why, I just have that feeling. And in the next 2 or 3 years, if America prospers, I think Israel will prosper.
I agree with you on that.
I still think they're going to get double-crossed by the Arabs somewhere down the road, but if they can just pretend to like them for another 5, 6, 7 years, wouldn't that be wonderful? I guess we probably ought to shut up before we say something we'll regret, right?
Well, if anyone does, if we don't have anything else to add, then I'll say good night, everyone. We will not have a program on the Friday after Thanksgiving. We typically do not have one then. But we'll be back next week, and we'll see y'all then. Everybody enjoy the rest of your Sabbath, and good night, everybody.
Good night.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.